welcome to our Singularity Salon event. Today we have the pleasure to have as our guest Nathaniel Calhoun.
Good evening, Greece, from tomorrow morning on the other side of the world. Looking forward to sharing with you all a few of the things that give me hope, even in the time of COVID-19. These are some solutions that I've seen at work over the last couple of years in particular that are actually really available. They're applicable. They're not locked up behind a paywall or jealously guarded by a company. These are things that are being accelerated and improved and made available for communities and economies around the world to apply. So I think of Greece as a very open-minded country, a place that's willing to experiment with new forms of collaboration in order to make change. So I hope that you find some inspiration in these ideas. They're very much within your ability to apply to the circumstances that you face. Now, Greece was already grappling with some economic difficulties before COVID-19. I don't have to tell Greeks that recessions are hard. I don't have to tell Greeks that unemployment is discouraging and harmful to the individual, and that high rates of unemployment as a nation can be difficult to pull your way out of. Your country so far has been handling the pandemic really well, but you are actually, as you know, more tourism dependent than anywhere else in the European Union. By some estimates, this could be up to 25% of your economic activity, right? And your best 3 months are around the corner. Everybody wants to be in Greece in summer, and if that's something that can't happen in the usual way, that's 150,000 businesses or more impacted, and probably 1 million families in that process. So even though, as I understand, about 20% of your population is over 65, which means that they're more vulnerable, more likely to suffer or to even die from COVID-19, the pressure to open back up must be extraordinary. A number of countries that I care about are in that position. New Zealand and Costa Rica are right there with you. They've had a promising early response to COVID-19, but they all rely on tourism, and they need the kind of influx of global dollars, global euros to come in and touch all these businesses and all these families. The thing is that there's obviously risk there to calculate, and one of the things that's a common thread of the ideas that I'll be sharing with you is these are approaches that are collaborative and that leverage the strength that exists within your local economy in a different way to try to minimize the risks that you have to take, especially because the cost of risk taking is a little higher than usual right now. The global economy, however, is built on risk-taking. Investors and businesses alike put massive money behind what they hope will become unicorns or good decisions. And they know they're fully comfortable losing, maybe 99% of their bets as long as they win really big. It's not quite as accessible to government to act that way, but governments do take risks to keep industries alive, to keep industries competitive. That's something that they do. What we know, though, is there is going to be people listening to this call who have the assets, the investors, the engineers, the intellectual property, the training to build a business and punch it out with the biggest companies in the world. You have a sector of your economy that's playing at that level. But there's also going to be a lot of people who are listening who they do fine when the economy is doing all right. But when the economy tanks or when there's massive macroeconomic shocks, they might need help, and that's okay too. That's the time when some of these options that I'll be walking you through may become available and may help restore some of the kind of dignity and the drive to areas of the economy that really just can't stand up as tall when the risk is really high. So the first thing that I want to walk you through as an example of that is some lessons that have been learned just a little bit west of you in the Mediterranean, on the island of Sardinia in Italy. So if you rewind to 2008 and 2009 and that global recession, Sardinia was hit really hard. You know, they also like tourists, so that was part of it. But in general, when the economy contracted around Sardinia, the thing was, yeah, sure, high unemployment, but a couple years later, their economy wasn't restarting. Now, all the businesses were still there, all the Sardinians were still there. They had the raw material to do their business as well, but they didn't have euros. They needed liquidity to get their markets going, but the outside world wouldn't give it to them. So what they did is actually really transformational and is becoming a blueprint that other places can follow. They created a mutual credit system. And what a mutual credit system is like a closed and safe economy for the small and medium scale enterprises, also larger enterprises if they wish to join in that economic area. So what has to happen is the business passes a certain threshold of credibility. They've been around for a while, they're vouched for by different people. That threshold can be set where you want. After they're vouched for as credible, they can enter this community and begin to transact a digital currency. In this case, it was called the Sardex, and it was pegged to the euro. So everybody understood a Sardex is a euro, but it was not interchangeable for the euro or any other fiat or international currency. You could not use Sardex outside the system. And when you enter the system, you immediately have the right to spend up to a certain cap of Sardex. Say you get to spend 10,000 Sardex, but then if you try to spend beyond that, you're prompted to actually provide services. You have to provide services. Or if you're providing services exclusively and accumulating debt up to the same floor on the bottom, then you could say, all right, you've accumulated 10,000 debt of Sardex. Now you need to start buying things. So in that way, the system itself is geared to encourage a transaction rate. That's what it's trying to do. Now, if you imagine a business that's in distress, that's challenged by this pandemic, maybe it's going into the red or it's maybe even close to failing. If you could take 5 to 10% of the transactions that business does, move them into a new currency that business can earn in a different way without the usual process of acquiring customers, without having to acquire customers from the usual places, that could be the difference between bankruptcy and failure and future success. It's a little pocket of resilience that's insulated from whatever shortages there are of global currencies or whatever devaluations or runaway value there is of currencies, things that are out of control of the local market. Now, I was talking to the founder of Sardex just the other night, and I learned something very encouraging, which is that this last quarter was literally the best quarter of Sardex's business ever. So they were getting more signups than they've ever had before, a higher rate of signups. They were pushing more transactions than ever before. And the interest that they're kind of fielding is also at all-time highs. That's an incredibly powerful indication that mutual credit systems are counter-cyclical, meaning that when things get volatile, when things get tough, these systems actually thrive. And that's exactly the kind of thing you want to be looking for now. Because while I could come in here with some hard technical expertise and say, there's this amazing opportunity in biotechnology, there's just going to be 1 or 2 businesses in your country, or maybe even like 50 that are poised to take advantage of that, but not everybody. So when you find something that's potentially applicable to everybody, that is counter-cyclical, and you are in the middle of the beginning of a recession, it's something that you want to take a closer look at. Now, Sardex in Italy isn't just in Sardinia now. There's 11 mutual credit systems in Italy, and they've all been learning. There's a lot of lessons that come from them. You're looking here at a map of Wales, and that's because it looks like Wales will be the second country, at least, to start a wide-scale pilot of a mutual credit system. It's Northern Wales in particular, and a group of people and organizations that kind of rally under the concept of the circular economy that will be launching their mutual credit system there. It was scheduled to be launched already. It got delayed a bit by COVID, but I confirmed with their leadership that they're still funded, they're still ready to go. So we should start seeing a second set of innovation there. One of the things that so far seems to be emerging around mutual credit systems is they actually do particularly well in island nations, or nations where the boundaries are really clear and distinct. Not necessarily a nation, it could be an island within a nation, as in the case of Sardinia, which to my mind is just one more reason why this may be particularly appropriate to Greece. Because you can also have a few islands that are smaller that band together. Maybe they already have a lot of trade and commerce amidst one another. They can create the rules of their own economy. And the thing with this is it's not trying to replace or compete with the dollar or the euro. It is complementary to it. It is simply setting up an area that is less afflicted by the downsides of the global economy. The global economy is wonderful when it sends you healthy tourists from afar, but when it can't send you healthy tourists from afar, you're a little bit on your own in that sector. So changing gears here, I've put a slide up that's showing you Cambiatus, which is an organization in Costa Rica. Now, Cambiatus are a few years down the road at applying blockchain technology to create currencies that bring liquidity and resilience to not whole economies, but they start zooming in. And so they're looking at maybe an industry or a sector or a marketplace. So if you were thinking, okay, a mutual credit system's great, but like I personally can't go around and recruit, 7% of the overall Greek economy to join a brand new experiment, an easier out-of-the-box kind of solution would be to find an organization like Cambiatus and say, look, okay, we hoteliers of Greece are interested in creating a currency amongst one another that enables us to transact with one another that can only be spent amongst one another. Cambiatus.
Nathaniel, I also get a message, and my experience is your voice is low. Can you please check your mic? Something happened suddenly and your voice is very low.
Yeah, and I can also just speak with a little bit more volume. Do you think that's coming through better for you?
Thank you. Yes.
All right, cool. So you can think of Cambiatus as a toolkit for designing currencies that meet the needs of your industry, your sector, or it could even be your business, your community, your football club, your faith-based organization. But let me give you a picture of what that looks like to help explain it. So one of the programs that Cambiatus has helped set up is works specifically with a type of business that Costa Ricans call a pulperia. A pulperia is like a little store selling food and household goods. Every neighborhood, every village would have at least one pulperia, and it can be kind of like an anchor institution in like a really small economy or a really small area. And so now those pulperos, they have a currency of their own, which is called the puls. They can only spend the puls amongst other pulperias, and it's kind of giving them a little pocket of their economic activity that does not have to happen in the US dollar and does not have to happen in the Costa Rican sol. But the interesting thing, one of the interesting things about this is Cambiatus can engineer the incentive system around that currency to encourage behavior that they want to see in that ecosystem. So in the case of the pools, they're looking at businesses that are pretty small and often a little bit more humble, sometimes even informal, where people haven't necessarily done all of the registrations or all of the formalities of a larger business like a supermarket. So what they've done is they've encouraged, they've created the ability to generate new pools when the pulpero completes online learning modules about business practices. It could be around, bookkeeping or marketing, whatever it is that the overall ecosystem wants to raise the quality of. They can send the members of that economy through that lesson and then reward them with this currency after they've completed it. Now, when you think about that, it doesn't just have to be about business literacy. In the time of a pandemic, you could reward businesses that offer personal protective equipment, PPE, to their employees. You could reward businesses that are offering generous sick leave scenarios. So whatever that behavior is that you actually wish the economy rewarded, because right now the economy punishes businesses that do that, right? They have to spend their own money. Some people are dissuaded. You can tweak the economy so that it's rewarding what you want if you're in charge of the rules of money issuance, which is something kind of very creative to play around with. Again, this is not competing with or trying to replace other currencies. It's trying to give people an experience of economies with different rules that are focused on local strengthening. Because of some of these early successes, we're seeing INGOs, nonprofits, and governments start to take a really close look at the potential of complementary and alternative currencies, even within the context of COVID-19 relief. You've probably seen the headlines, oh, should we move to UBI, or everybody should get a stimulus check. There's a lot of money printing as a result of the virus. But when you're printing your national currency, you all know, you can end up destabilizing the whole show. You can end up creating hyperinflationary environments, or you can just accumulate a debt burden that it's very hard to recover from. The interesting thing about exploring money printing in a more diverse way is that you might be able to avoid some of those long-term downsides of messing with your core currency. Or if the currency is not under your control, if the Netherlands and Germany control your currency, it might be nice to have some pockets that you can play around with on your own, you know? The kind of motto there is, if money is not reaching your community or your citizens, you can tell a new story of money. And technology is available off the shelf now for you to tell a new story of money that also has the credibility, the technical bones under it to support that vision. And I think it's indicative of the maturity and the momentum of this ecosystem, that there's literally like a class you can take now to learn about currency design. I saw this just pop up yesterday on my feed. The launch date of the classes is not yet completely firmed up. It sounds like it's going to be within the next month or so. We've got Commons Engine and MetaCurrency, the MetaCurrency project, literally offering you a masterclass on what does it mean to design a currency. So this isn't something that's only available to state economists or the central bank. This is something available to any team of individuals that want to wrap their head around the necessary tech stack, or get the investors required to license a tech stack that someone else has created. And I know that the curriculum of this course, I can't speak to the quality because the course hasn't existed yet. I'll take it. I'm interested in seeing what they teach. But I know they're bringing a lot of experience to the table. And I know they're covering issues like, what cause mutual credit systems to succeed or fail? What cause alternative currencies to succeed or fail? Like, they're specifically trying to increase the hit rate of practitioners, which is a really cool sign for the readiness of this area of innovation. And I mentioned unemployment earlier. And so kind of as we pivot into the second area of solutions and ideas that I'll talk to you about, I just want to draw your attention to this chart, because what you're looking at is the percentage of all eligible workers who are employed year over year. And so what you see is predictably
employed, who are employed.
Employed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're seeing is, of course, during the recession around, or during the crash in 99, employment goes way down. And during the 2008, 2009 recession, employment goes way down. But the reason that the bars are stacking lower each time is that when we recover from the recession, we don't put everybody back to work. Now, there's different theories as to why. Some people bring this out as indications of technological unemployment, as automation, bursts of automation happening during these times. But whether it's automation or just layoffs and a new vision of the org chart, what we know is that during recessions, businesses must take evasive maneuvers. They must cut costs ruthlessly, and often that involves laying people off. The side effect is, when you're a business and you get ruthless and you lay people off, you often do discover that you can make a little bit more money with fewer people, and lots of businesses decide to keep doing that when the recession is over. So it creates this incredible pressure. And then on the flip side of it, you don't get incredible pressure to hire back every employee that you just proved you could work without. Now, this is symptomatic of an economy that generally rewards very concentrated ownership, where power, decision-making, and control are very concentrated, and where you're trying to reward the investors, the shareholders, and the board, as opposed to the workers, the people, the planet, right? It's a certain culture of doing business that operates this way. But the businesses that I'm going to talk to you about from this point forward have proven more able in the times of crisis, not just to survive, but to survive without sacrificing their members, their community, their workers. They've found pathways through recessions and difficult times that are a little bit more just and equitable, a little bit more likely to bring resilience at that community level. And cooperatives are one of the things we're going to look at for a little while. Here in New Zealand, just a few days ago, the Prime Minister encouraged the entire business ecosystem to consider 4-day work weeks. It's not law, but it was an encouragement. Why don't you all consider doing this? People generally like that idea. People aren't mad about the idea of long weekends for life, right? But they get a little worried if they think that's going to come with layoffs or they're going to lose their benefits. Benefits are a big one. If you tell a business everybody works less, but they have to pay benefits for everyone, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow. But what we've seen so far is cooperatives are often the only type of business that will actually go down to a 4 or a 3-day work week for their business when times are tough, because they don't want to fire anybody. When things are good, they share the opportunity all around. But when things are rough, they share the hardship, and everybody works a little bit less. And they have the ability to bounce back, having not lost members of their community in the interim. Now, co-ops have a bit of a dusty reputation. People think, oh, you know, they're kind of last century, or they're corrupt, or they're bureaucratic, or they're inefficient. But there isn't a sector of any economy in the world that doesn't have innovation going within it right now. And if you think you know one that does, just give yourself an hour online, look it up, and you're going to find that there's kind of transformational innovations afoot. So we're going to look at some of the ones that apply to the cooperative sector. One of these is specifically the idea of a platform cooperative, which is the entry of the old-fashioned brick-and-mortar cooperative into the digital era, into digital infrastructure, where they can start to take advantage of the opportunities that online commerce and these network effects can offer them. What you're looking at on your screen is the landing site for Fairbnb.coop, which was just launched this year between Bologna, Venice, Barcelona, Valencia, and also Amsterdam as a direct competitor to Airbnb. So if you might know different cities, different countries have reacted to Airbnb differently. Some of them have felt like it's an opportunity to dodge taxes. Some of them have been concerned about the effect on the neighborhood. Some of them haven't liked that all the revenue is going to Silicon Valley instead of staying in the metropolis. There's plenty of reasons to want to compete with Airbnb, but the best one from my point of view is it's no longer technically impressive or technically special what they've built. Maybe it was 10 years ago, but now anyone can put up a platform of that variety. And especially if you bring some heavyweight cities to the table, you can do so while creating visibility and network effects. But just like mutual credit systems can change the nature of money, platform cooperatives can change the nature of business. So what rules have these folks baked in that are different? Well, for one, every host can only offer one apartment. So this does not become a platform for property speculators, property managers, big investors. This is literally every person can be on here once with one home. Next, they make sure that 50% of the profit that's generated from all of the business on this site is reinvested into the communities where the rental is taking place. So instead of that same portion going off to Silicon Valley, which does not need more money, that's being plowed back in to the area where the visitors are. At the same time, they can also make sure that there's data privacy. They're not selling the data of the hosts or of the visitors, so there's not some creepy monetization going on behind the scenes. And of course, they can make sure that the tax regime is favorable and actually benefits the city where it is. Now, staying with the theme of tourism, because it's a big sector within Greece, You may know that Airbnb diversified recently to offer experiences as well as accommodation. And here we have a French initiative called Les Oiseaux de Passage, which is doing the same thing. They're offering the experience layer of for tourists. So whether you want to go on a hike or be guided through a culinary tour or be shown all the best galleries in town, there are now these independent providers of these experiences offering that via Oiseaux de Passage, but owning and managing Oiseaux de Passage, the digital infrastructure. And one of the principles that's really cool about cooperatives is they're supposed to find and cooperate with other cooperatives. The demand that they build network effects around each other is built into their very code. So Airbnb and Oiseaux de Passage link up and become two pieces of more decentralized infrastructure for people in the tourist business that don't want to tithe so much money up and out of the economy. It's also the difference between democratizing and decentralizing, because people have been talking about, oh, Airbnb democratizes tourism because everyone can access the platform, right? But it is a bit of a democracy because it's a tyranny of majority in the sense of if you've got the money and you've got the most properties, you can kind of crowd out the other people on the platform. These are decentralized. You're not just a gig worker, you're a manager owner. You have the potential to get behind the curtain and really understand the infrastructure, to learn more about it, to understand the linkages with the other people in the economy, and to insist on fair pay as opposed to being constantly eroded in your position vis-a-vis the giant platform company.
So true.
Now, yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of opportunity there. And I'll shift gears because one of the things that that people have kind of gotten where the people have lost their encouragement about cooperatives is like, yeah, okay, even if I can imagine that it would work, it doesn't grow, it doesn't scale, it doesn't have that like that potential that gets people excited who've been choosing icons or choosing their heroes based on these stratospheric growers, right? So the Brightly Cooperative is the first cooperative that I know of that has figured out how to franchise what they've done. Now, the franchise model is a tried and proven approach for growing, even to be a significant global brand, right? Every McDonald's that you see, every Wendy's, that's a franchise. So somebody figured out, how do you let business owners copy and paste this thing into different scenarios? But if you've ever looked into that paperwork, those contracts are pretty harsh, and the definite winner is the company first, not the franchise owner. And the Brightly cleaners are looking at this differently. So these were home and office cleaners in New York City that came together. Their first step was, let's create a cooperative. Let's bargain together, and let's face the marketplace together. That move alone raised their average compensation from about $11 to $25 an hour. So that move alone was transformational, right? And in a sector that is often very taken advantage of, and in a sector that exists everywhere in the world. But the cool thing is, once they formed a cooperative, they didn't just think, okay, we're done. We're here in New York. We'll get more house cleaners from New York. They wanted to take the lessons that they'd learned and empower the other cleaners that they knew, at first all around the United States, but potentially all around the world. That was easier for them because they'd invested in their own digital infrastructure, specifically like a mobile app and ecosystem for client acquisition. So as a cooperative, they made like a nice digital interface that actually increased their rate of client acquisition by 2 to 3 times. So they started getting way more clients because they had this awesome app that people were coming through and finding them. But they also didn't just stop there. They didn't think, great, we've got an app. You know, that's 2009 kind of success. They thought, all right, how do we leverage this digital infrastructure to bolster this entire industry that we're in? So what they now do, instead of saying an individual cleaner anywhere can come onto this, like an individual Uber driver would come onto Uber, they say the smallest unit that comes onto this is another cooperative. So if you're a cleaner in Detroit and you want to access this, you need to form a cooperative, become a Brightly cooperative, and then access Up and Go. So now they have this growth engine where they're seeding other cooperatives. And every time they do that, they're actually starting to create the network effects that go with a digital business. You can imagine this same sort of thing for other disadvantaged areas of labor. It could be seasonal labor, you know, like fruit pickers, the people that are out there pressing olives or what have you. You could do it for street vendors, transportation drivers. And the lesson is that if you do it correctly, if you set it up right, you can actually then take that show on the road, as it were. You can use that expertise of managing digital infrastructure to attract a whole base of clients who are there to use the technology that you've built and to help invest in it and to help ensure that it keeps improving and that its transformational potential is realized. Wow. One of the other historical headwinds that cooperatives faced is they couldn't raise money. And one of the reasons why is that one of the hardwired principles of a cooperative is one member, one vote. Right? The president of the cooperative doesn't get to vote 10,000 times. It's not a Mark Zuckerberg situation, right? Everybody gets a say in what's going on. It is a democratically run business. But Co-op Exchange, which just launched, is specifically configured to help cooperatives raise funds without giving over votes or control. So it's also specifically configured to help anyone, anywhere in the world, make an investment in a cooperative that they believe in. So you could do this. It's all based on blockchain technology with the supposed advantage that if you're paying into the system, investing in a particular co-op, they can basically stream you passive income as if it was dividends rolling off the back of of a traditional equity. Only the cooperative sector tends to be more resilient. When normal businesses are failing and going under, cooperatives often survive. There's, again, study after study that they survive better in recessions and that they last longer on average than other businesses. So this may be opening up to retail investors a less risk-prone area of small investments. Now, why do I have a zebra here as I'm working towards the close of this presentation? You may have heard that people are talking about we should build zebras, not unicorns, right? The idea of the mythical, often white unicorn sparkling and making you $1 billion is one exit. That's one notion of what success looks like. But the zebra company is a business that is set up to generate a profit. Might be a modest profit, but it's going to just keep generating that profit year over year over year over year. It's good for the community. They're likely to be social businesses. They're more diverse. And so there's a huge community of practice that's coming together around the idea of zebra businesses. You can go to zebrasunite.com and find an open community talking about all these templates and strategies for doing business in this with this different notion of success. But exit to community is even a build on top of that. And it's particularly relevant. It's kind of where I want to close. Because if you're in business and your business is really starting to suffer right now, if it's because of COVID or a recession or any other set of challenges, what you often face is you're like, all right, I might have to basically put my assets on a fire sale. I might need to be stripped for parts by a bank so that like I as an owner and maybe a couple of the executives that I like can get a little bit of a payout before we just wrap this thing up, right? And there's nothing noble in that. Nobody dreams of that exit. Nobody starts a business to be picked apart by a vulture system and have no legacy remaining. What does it look like to imagine a different option? An exit to community that keeps what you've built alive and running, but maybe for a different set of people and with a different set of goals. I like another thing that I've seen is Italy created a law that they call the Marcora law. And the Marcora law says that when a business is going to put itself up for sale, especially when it's distressed or going out of business, the workers have the first right to buy that business and to continue owning it thereafter. And because that might not seem that realistic, like how are the owners going to buy the business? You can't just say that and think it does enough. They added another piece to that law, which is really interesting, which is that those workers can put what the unemployment benefits that they would have received if they were put out of work. they can turn towards investing in the business. So the government knows, look, I'll either pay these people when they're helpless, or I can take that money and help them buy this business so that the business continues. And indeed, these businesses are thriving. They're continuing with a much higher survival rate than traditional businesses. The employees totally know how to run it. And now they're super motivated because they're also owners. And at least 14,000 jobs have been created in Italy because of this law, since this law was put on the books. Now,
14,000 jobs.
14,000, yeah.
Amazing.
So you might be thinking like, all right, even if that seems partly relevant to you, the idea of it's a big evasive maneuver to take a normal business and suddenly cooperativize the whole thing. One of the interesting things is you can think about this in smaller pieces. Exiting to community can be partial or gradual. It doesn't have to be all at once, this big dire situation. And as an example of that, if you imagine that you're running a hotel, tourism's way down right now. You're actually looking into maybe selling your hotel and giving it up. You might decide that you could cooperativize part of your hotel. That could look like, let's say you have an industrial kitchen. You might decide, let me advertise and recruit and see if around my community, a cooperative might come together and form, kind of buy shares in the management and use of my industrial kitchen. So that when I'm not serving guests, this industrial kitchen is maybe helping to serve families that were not food secure as part of like a government initiative. It might turn itself into a pop-up lab that's helping to incubate or experiment with new fun food businesses, trying out and helping other people launch different restaurants. It might link up with educational institutions. And then when your guests come back, it might turn to them and it might draw some of that revenue. Now, being a hotel with an attached cooperative community kitchen can become a unique selling point. It can become a point of differentiation and a market advantage even in and of itself. Plus, it would create a reason why the community would be more invested ultimately in the success of the businesses attached to or around it. So this is the kind of thing when you find yourself looking at your asset sheet being like, I don't know what to do with, we're going to have to close this store, or this warehouse is too much, or we don't use that mill anymore. There's a lot of ways to say, hey, instead of just giving that to a bank at a terrible cut of what we had and having no legacy and being kind of embarrassed about it, what if we reimagine the way that the community absorb and productively use that set of resources? So the phrase exit to community is a reminder that you can pause when there's something that used to be valuable, and before you go along with the toxic belief that it's not valuable anymore because your economic stewardship of it failed, you can look at how to take that valuable thing and give your community a chance to make it like an enduring part of the characteristics in the economy around you. So it would be a magical legacy to leave as opposed to just getting your check and walking away. And if you're interested in this platform cooperative ecosystem, IOO.coop is the Internet of Ownership website where they track this fast growing ecosystem. At last look, there were more than 400 platform cooperatives listed there and updated there. 5 years ago, there were 8. So this is an area that's growing, hyper exponentially. And I would point out that if you're really interested in going deep, there are also now digital online classes where you can study what it looks like to set up a platform cooperative. So same as the kind of currency design, this is becoming democratized as an area for you to innovate within. So what I'm hoping is that some of these ideas kind of percolate into different areas of your own economy, and you see the benefit of being, a citizen instead of a consumer. You see the benefit of actually owning the solutions to both this pandemic and to whatever economic recession it relates to. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Ευχαριστώ πολύ also. So actually what we have seen from your presentation, what we have heard for me that is different is like in the era of disruption, and we can also disrupt currencies and we can disrupt ownership.
Yeah, exactly. Things that we thought were kind of holy aren't. We can play with those designs.
And actually, we have the tools to do this kind of initiative. So, let's go back to Sardinia, because this is an impressive example. And I want to ask you, so how you get the first 10,000, how you get the first points, how the system works. And I'm not asking to give us details from Sardinia, but maybe an example to understand how a community, let's say an island or Greece, Greece, we are 10 million people, less than New York. It's not that a big country. So any idea of how the whole thing starts? How you can start it?
Yeah. So there's the how you start as the team that builds the mutual credit system is a lot of ground game, a lot of going around and educating businesses and signing them up. There's no way around that, and it's hard work, right? That's anytime you're trying to build a new network or bring on users, if it's not already if it doesn't already exist as a network that you're just pushing something through, but you're trying to create it as a new economy, you have a lot of customer acquisition to do. And right now with mutual credit systems, that's the hard work at the beginning. But if your question is about how an individual business gets started, like for instance, now there's so many businesses in Sardinia approaching Sardex for the first time, or around Italy approaching the other mutual credit systems saying, we would like to sign up. That used to be an in-person process, that vetting process, but because of the COVID situation, that's now a digital process as well. You can be kind of interviewed, you supply some key information. Once you pass their thresholds, and the architects of these systems can set the thresholds together. Once the threshold is set, you enter the economy. You've got your account, and you can start providing services, or you can start demanding them. So if you were a hotel and you came in and you haven't been in the system before, you might think, all right, we usually spend 3,000 euros a week on laundry. I wonder if our laundry provider is on here. And you might find that your laundry provider is on there. You're like, oh, great. I'm gonna ask the laundry provider to pay them via Sardex this week, or I'm gonna ask my egg supplier to pay them via Sardex this week, or our stationery provider, or the renewable energy company. You look for the nodes around your economy that already represent your expenses, and you try to move some of your expenses into this new currency. Meanwhile, the other members of the system see that you've just joined, and they're like, I wanted a vacation, and now I'm going to use it with my Sardex. I'm going to put my mother-in-law in your hotel when she visits, whatever it is, right? They figure out what are the things being offered around that we can remove from the Euro economy.
I see. Or you can say, I can send my employees on vacation.
Yeah, you use the hall, use the restaurant for team building, right? It gets people thinking where they wouldn't ordinarily spend money. They're like, this doesn't have the same cost of money on my ledger sheet, so I might be more willing to do it, which is where it has the potential to knit a local economy together better and make people experience more prosperity without kind of hurting their books or making them reckless.
So it's a kind of a barter agreement with credit points that you coordinated through an application and through the use of technology, in other words.
It has similarities with barter, except that it's generally pegged to a hard currency, so you're not having to waste your time deciding what the value
negotiating
is.
of the value.
Yeah, I mean, because for some people that's a fun part of the barter economy, but it's also an inefficiency, and it's also a place where discrimination can exist. Within the Sardex system, if you want to come stay at my hotel, you don't have to negotiate with me what the price is. My price of the room is the price of the room, right? So it doesn't have that fluidity that the barter economy has, but it does have some of the advantages where people that weren't exchanging before can start exchanging, and exchange can take place without a hard currency, literally in the middle of it.
You mentioned before that you know the owner. So what is their background? Is it a fintech? Have they been working in a bank? How they get to start such an innovative initiative?
Well, it's interesting. From what I understand, the founder wasn't coming from a hard economics background, wasn't a student of classical economics in any sense, but was more of a practitioner and a community organizer that has learned over the 12 years since they got going a lot of the relevant lessons for setting this kind of thing up. So I think it's part of why they succeeded, because they didn't, early on when people were like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that, they're just like, I don't need an expert to tell me what I can and can't do with money. Like, look around the world and see central banks destroy their countries with reckless money printing. They could be credentialed to the heavens and still make lousy decisions. So he was looking around, working with the community. If you have as many minds at the table as possible, and you adopt a risk mitigative posture, if you're not trying to always just grow as fast as possible, you can take these cautious steps bit by bit until you reassure the economy and the potential members that you're a responsible steward of the community that you've got. So I think really the first pioneers of this have charted this territory on their own. It is definitely fintech relevant. I mean, I know that the founder does legitimate coding some of the time. When he's like, oh, we need to code something, he can do that, right? So there is a hard technical expertise that's at the table, but it wouldn't need to be there. A lot of it is a social technology before it's a hard technology. But it is definitely benefited by the distributed ledger technology and blockchain ecosystem. Sardex is in a place where if a new entrant to the distributed ledger technology kingdom kind of came along and offered much better transaction rates and bells and whistles to the technical system, they could kind of pivot over there and benefit from the technology that's coming down the line. So they haven't locked themselves into like one really limited zone of technical operation, which I think is also really savvy to set themselves up that way.
So from what I've heard, I understand that you need also to have a community, to have started a community first, to have this trust level in the community, and then start exploring such initiative. So Nathaniel, let's assume that a bank wants to help or to get involved in such an initiative. Do you see any ways on working together with such initiative? Could they initiate something like that with credit points, or it's totally irrelevant?
No, I mean, if a bank wants to get involved, there's a lot of assets the bank has that they can help with. But if the bank wants to get involved as a knowledge provider, it could be that the bank is kind of like mentoring either the leadership team or maybe even offering some of the kind of business literacy and capacitation that the members might need. I don't know if that's as likely in Greece as it would be. If you're in a really low income economy that's more informal, banks are typically a little bit more willing to spend their time offering financial education because people aren't even aware of the services that they provide. So they have to let people know what does it look like to take this type of loan? What does it look like what is an insurance product? And they're willing to do some of that education. So I can imagine a bank helping with some of the outreach, maybe helping with some of the client acquisition, because that's one of the big things up front. If a bank were to say, hey, we're notifying all of our small businesses that this is a call for interest in the establishment of a mutual credit system. We know that a lot of you are economically stressed in the time of COVID. We don't want to have to do a bunch of loan forgiveness, but we want you to stay in business. So we're looking into ways that you can kind of transact and stay resilient so that you can pay us back in the end, right? It still can be ultimately self-aligned with a bank, especially if they're leveraged. The more leveraged that they are, the more invested they should be in the community's thriving. Now, some banks literally want you to go bankrupt to take your property. If the bank is like that, they're not gonna appreciate this initiative. But if you've got a credit union or you've got an ethically run bank that would rather have the businesses stay in business than possess their assets, I can see them getting interested. I can see them joining it. Any business that has a large client base could become a pathway of advertisement for client acquisition and for sensitization. as could a chamber of commerce or a football club or any other association.
Wonderful, wonderful. Maybe they can start working together. I've read, and I don't know where, many years ago, and that actually shaped the foundation of what I was doing in life, and I changed it. And it said that there is nothing more addictive than monthly salary.
Really?
And that got me thinking. And now with the crisis, we have seen two things happening. Employment got disrupted. A lot of people, employees, they found themselves without jobs. And a lot of entrepreneurs, they found themselves with a lot of employees that they have nothing to do. For example, if it's a restaurant or a hotel or a travel agency. And what do you project as the future of employment? Because I think now there are two kind of thinking processes on both sides. Employees will start thinking of, hire as you go, or more flexible ways of employment, not full-time work. And I totally understand that. I mean, imagine that you have 1,000 people or 100 people and you have zero business. And on the other side, I think also smart employees will start thinking of how they can get different and diverse revenue flows of revenue, streams of revenue that they cannot be disrupted. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it strikes me that whoever said, there's nothing more addictive than a monthly salary.
I can't remember. No, yeah.
But whoever said that obviously never printed money, right? I'm sure that printing money is more addictive than working for it.
Okay, good point. Very good point.
I think when you're looking at the future of work, the first lens that you looked at was, the employer, and the employer is experiencing the pain of an underutilized human asset. They're like, why am I paying for this person? They're not even doing anything. I don't even have work for them to do. That's an uncomfortable place to be. You don't start a business to do that. People start charities to do that, right? So I've been in the position as a business owner where I would rather go on to Upwork or some online site and pay a contractor in another country a small amount of money because I don't have the resources to bring on a full-time person. And my work is going up and down, so I don't want to be stuck paying someone when it's down, right? I've been in that position, so I empathize with that position. That's the way the economy is set up right now. You can't. So what does it look like? If on the one hand, sure, I can shop around for the best platforms. I can automate what I can use the crowd where I want. There's all these technical tricks for paying people as little as possible. And some of us do that because we want extra money or because we don't have extra money. But it's just, we feel compelled. Now, and the workers on the other side might feel like, okay, I can't get job security. Nobody's offering me job security. And so people take lots of jobs. They're like, I'll do a little bit over here. I'll do a little bit over here. If everything goes bad, I'll drive this, or I'll deliver this, or I'll clean this. And people have their backup plans and their backup plans. And in today's kind of economic theory, that's called like precarity. People are in a precarious situation. They cannot depend upon, when they look 6 months forward, are you 100% you'll be paid in 6 months? A growing number of people are like, no, I have no idea. I mean, I hope so. I hope I'll get paid from one of these 5 things that I do. But ultimately, like, I'm precarious. I can't make big investments. I can't dream big. I'm freaked out because I don't know where my health insurance is coming from. If I have a car accident, I don't know if I can fix my car, right? Like, I'm in a precarious situation. So the answer to that isn't just to compete harder and compete faster and compete with more technology than like the other workers who are precarious. That's the answer we're given, and that builds the economy we have. But the kind of things that I've been walking your viewers through today are options where you can say, you know what, like, let me take a step back from that. and let me look around my economy and find maybe some of what I do that can be organized differently, incentivized differently, rewarded differently, owned differently, so that I don't have to hustle as hard. Like, great for the entrepreneurs and the high growth tech startups. There's a whole other set of recommendations for them. But if you're not trying to become a software company, if you don't want to if you don't want to embrace more and more technology to be okay in the world, a better pathway for you might be maybe in 5 years, you're part of 3 different cooperatives. Maybe you work like one day a week for one of them. Maybe you contribute some space at your farm to another one. Maybe you're using 2 or 3 different complementary currencies, and you've brought your expenses down so low that you don't really need to do the same amount of work that you were doing before. Maybe you do some consulting digitally, and 1 day a week is fine for you because your energy needs are taken care of, your food needs are taken care of, your childcare needs are taken care of within the cooperatives and alternate currency systems that you've assembled around yourself. The thing that I like about that is if I were to spend like a year or 2, 3 or 4, eliminating my vulnerabilities, and my vulnerabilities are my known future expenses. Like right now, if I totally do up my house so that I'm on solar energy, I don't have to pay electricity bills in the future. That's one of my vulnerabilities gone. If I'm paying a lot of food and I'm like, oh, let me join like a community supported agriculture, or let me join this cooperative, or let me try to be a little more clever with the way that I feed myself. Maybe at the end of 2 years, I'm not really paying much for food anymore. And if I tick each of these expenses slowly off, by the end of that, I'm in a better position to spot opportunities and to grow a business than I ever was before. Because I'm not redlining, I'm not freaking out. I'm creative, I'm resourced, I'm in multiple networks, I'm learning about multiple businesses, I'm learning about multiple economic tools and devices. I can engineer clever streams of incentives that would never have occurred to me in my short-term panic for lack of euros.
Yeah, exactly. Nathaniel, I want to thank you and ask you if you have any closing comments, remarks, or what makes you optimistic about the future?
Well, I guess it was interesting to me, you referencing Winner Take All. It's a really good book, and I do think that if you read that book, you might come away kind of like righteously motivated to build a different economy. The other book that I would put,
I was depressed for a while, you know.
Yeah. I mean, he takes a pretty critical aim at the kind of thought leader or like tech speaker kind of arena, right? There's plenty to be challenged by in his work. But I was gonna just highlight another book for people that are interested in digging a little deeper, which would be Lost Connections.
Okay.
By a journalist named Johan Hari. The last name is Hari. And what people are already noticing around COVID is that like deaths of despair are rising. Mental health issues are rising. It has pushed a lot of vulnerable people too far. And we already had a mental health epidemic globally. But the historical way of dealing with that was very chemical, industrial, isolating, consumer. And Lost Connections is a brilliant set of investigations, of research into the real causes of the root causes of the mental health epidemic that we have. And it really gets into the types of connections that we need with other people, with meaningful futures, with stability. And so it provides kind of like a hopeful blueprint of like, what would it look like to get connected, not just to like 5G, but to meaning and to purpose and to others and to your heart and to your work. So it's on that hopeful note, I think like there's plenty to look at in there and grow worried about, but reframing things so that you're making more connections, not just to like a foreign managed currency, a foreign managed company, a foreign managed fashion icon, but more connections that can sustain you throughout your life and see you for who you are and encourage you to be more than a consumer. There's a lot there. There's a lot of hopeful possibilities in that direction.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you with us. And actually, I'm not done. I have to ask you one more thing. If you had to set up a grand challenge to solve one problem in the world, what would it be?
Oh, I think
Pick one. It's your time.
yeah. No, I mean, I would go. It's kind of in between governance and prosperity, and I would tackle like income inequality and asset inequality is toxic. Jeff Bezos should not be a trillionaire. I'm questionable about like the notion of billionaires, like when we have 800 million people starving per year, right? I would look at ways of structurally changing the system so that more people owned more stuff. More people should own and control more stuff. If we want democracy to work, people need to have the experience of owning and controlling things. Otherwise, they come in the door and they just rage vote and the system breaks. So if we want healthy governance, if we want healthy decisions, we have to give people the experience of meaningful ownership, meaningful decision making, so that they can be at the table with us helping to steer things correctly. So I would start getting into like policy, education, full bore to bring ownership of currency, of businesses to as many people as possible, because the follow-on effects of that are what people really want when they talk about education. You can make me literate and I can be completely disempowered. But if you increase my financial and my business literacy to the point that I start creating like new structures that empower me, I'm set. You don't need to show me other opportunities. I'm independent. So I would go in that direction. And it's why I talked to you all about what I did tonight.
Yes, it's like the Chinese proverb that says it's better to teach you how to fish rather than to give you fish so you can eat.
Or better to teach you how to form a fisherman's cooperative, assuming everybody knows how to fish already.
So true. Nathaniel, I hope that soon we will have the opportunity to welcome you in our beautiful country and have you with us in our next Singularity event. Thank you for being here.
That would be a pleasure.
Bye-bye.